Hello and welcome to another segment of Interviews That Matter. I'm your host Raj Mehta. Friends, in this segment, we bring those guests who influence our lives. This includes elected officials, policymakers, heads of major organizations, and other dignitaries. It is my sincere hope that the knowledge brought in by these guests will help our community. Today we have such guest, Dr. John Bierwirth, who is the Superintendent of Herricks School District. Herricks School District has the highest number of East Asian and South Asian population. Let's meet Dr. Bierwirth. Dr. Bierwirth, welcome sir, welcome to the show. Thank you for taking time to come here today.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you. Thank you very much.
No problem, sir. First let me say that there are 4 words that describe you.
Uh-oh. Yeah.
Collaborator.
Yeah.
Leader.
Yeah. Thank you.
Innovator.
I hope so.
And pioneer.
I believe absolutely, yes. Tried to be.
So let's hear from you that all these words, how it justifies.
Well,
It's
actually very simple. I do all of those things because I believe in the potential of human beings. And my specific job as an educator in the K-12 world is the potential of students from elementary through the time they exit high school. And throughout my entire career, I have tried to figure out what it is that we, the people who communities hire, need to do in order to get students much closer to their potential. And if that means innovating, if that means pioneering, if that means doing something that no one else has done, I think that's what you have to do. And I think you keep trying until you find something. If it doesn't work, you discard it, you try something, another thing, and you just keep moving on relentlessly until you can find things that allow you to make progress. But that's it. I wouldn't be innovating if there wasn't a need. You'd need to do that if your goal is to help students achieve at much higher levels than they have historically.
So can we know about your background? I mean, you have been an educator for like...
for too long.
Too long, right.
Too long,
exactly.
Yes. I'm a graduate of Yale.
Okay.
I did not expect to go into education. That's a long story in itself, but I backed into it. I grew up on Long Island. I came back to Long Island by serendipity. I worked first in Hempstead. I was in charge of all the grant programs there from 74 to 77.
Okay.
I worked as an assistant superintendent in Port Washington.
Oh, okay.
And then I became superintendent in Freeport at the age of 33, 34.
Wow.
In 1980. Just after I'd gotten married. My poor wife has lived with me as a superintendent for our entire marriage.
Wow.
And then I was superintendent there for 9 years. I was superintendent in Sachem. Then I was recruited to go to Portland, Oregon. 56,000 students. I became president of Outward Bound for 3 years for the United States. And then I went back doing what I really love, which is being a school superintendent. And I've been in Herricks since May of 2001.
Right, it's almost 12 years.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
And I've loved every moment of it. It's a very special community.
So in Long Island, I know actually you moved to you became superintendent to like 4 different districts.
Well, 3 on Long Island and 1 in Oregon.
Right, so that's like, big achievement rather.
Well, I've been around for a long time.
Right.
I've been around for a long time. But it's been fun, and there have been in that time period some very significant changes, which go back to your first question. I've seen a lot that hasn't changed that I find really disappointing, but there have been some very good changes. I see many more students taking advanced placement courses. I see students, for the most part, graduating, not being allowed to drop out. And I've seen some good things.
Before we go into Herricks School District, you are, as a collaborator, you are a collaborator, right? So you are right now working on the Nassau schools and municipal savings incentive
I
plan.
spend a lot of time working on, the information technology work group of that collaboration.
Oh, that's my kind of people.
Yes, yes, yeah. Well, you understand what we're doing. My job has been to try to get people to talk to each other.
Right, right.
I'm the technical part I leave to others. But the importance of getting people to talk to each other, to make things more efficient and more effective, and allow funds to be used in other areas or saved, for me is huge.
Good, good. So I want to wish you lots of luck in that.
Well, we've made a lot of progress. Somebody estimated that we've saved about $7 million so far.
Wow, okay.
I think that's a drop in the bucket.
It's a good start, though.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
As you know better than I do, laying fiber optic cable is a very expensive proposition.
Yeah.
And if we can keep school districts and governments and towns, villages, the county, the police departments from laying competing fiber optic cable networks across the island and instead share, we will have really done something significant. So I think the biggest savings will come in expenditures not made because we were able to persuade people to collaborate instead of creating their own networks.
So at the end of the day, if this is successful, then hopefully taxes will go down.
Taxes will go down or they won't go up by as much.
Either way.
Either way, the money, it will be money well saved. And at no cost in terms of efficiency. I mean, sometimes you get savings and it comes at a cost. You can't do as much.
Right.
But you know way better than I do that fiber optic cable has extraordinary capacity.
Yes.
And that most of it is only being used
partially, right?
Partially, a teeny fraction.
Yep.
So why can't school districts and the county, and as long as there's firewalls and security, why not share?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely makes sense.
It does make sense.
It does make sense. Okay, now let's come back.
I'm glad you didn't ask me any technical questions, because
what is bits and bytes? Just kidding.
I get people to talk to me. If it makes sense, I espouse it and support it.
Anyway, leave technical things to us. We'll do that for
absolutely.
you. Now let's come back to Herricks School District. Herricks School District has a large South Asian population in the school district, and you've been
large South Asian and large East Asian.
Large East Asian and South Asian, yes, and you've been there for 12 years.
Yep.
So if I were to ask you a question that when you first got on the job before 12 years and now, what are the milestones that you think you have achieved in making better,
Oh, I can point to a couple of very specific things.
Right.
When I arrived, roughly 1/4 to 1/3 of our students took advanced placement classes.
Okay.
We've now passed 70% of the graduating class last year. My guess is that we will be 80 or 85% in a year or two.
Okay.
The top students were taking as many as they need. It was important, however, to us to broaden that so that when students went off to college, students who were in the bottom half of the class, that they were prepared to do college level work. And taking one AP course doesn't mean that you're prepared to go to college, but at least it gives you a taste. The second thing is that, and this almost seems like a contradiction, is that when I got there, I started having conversations with teachers, with administrators, with parents, and I said, where do we want to be 3 to 5 years from now? And it's obviously been longer than that, but where do we want to be 3 to 5 years from now?
Right.
And, as I tried to move the conversation along, I would say, are 8 AP courses twice as good as 4, or 10 twice as good as 5? And everybody said, no, 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 no. It's not necessary. We want to see students leave here who can do a number of things, who can think critically, who can make judgments about the information that they get regardless of source, who can take what they learn in AP chemistry and remember it and apply it when they're in AP physics the next year, that they don't just take the exam and then promptly forget it. And then when they get to college, can take the information from AP physics and AP chemistry and apply it there, that they can apply that knowledge to real world problems. Academic knowledge is great, but if you can't apply it to anything, it's not terribly useful.
Right.
That they could put things in a global context. So if they were studying something in AP biology, when they read something in a newspaper, could they relate what they had learned in biology to some kind of environmental or some other kind of crisis elsewhere in the world? And lastly, could they collaborate effectively with other groups of people? Maybe you don't need to do that much in high school, but you need to do it in life, and you have to do more and more of it when you get to college.
So this was one of the milestones that...
Well, we started research programs. We have programs in a variety of areas, and more students are participating in those. And I feel really good about both how far our students have gone and the number of students who are participating.
Is that as a result of... what is the result? Why this happened? Like, is it good teachers? Is it because of the good students? Is it because of the parents' involvement? What is the mix?
I would say all of the above. Plus, I would say we made things a priority, and some things we went into because they were planned, and some other things we stumbled into, and it's pure serendipity. Now, let me give you an example of serendipity. We got involved in the National History Day. It turned out to be an extraordinary educational experience as well as a lot of fun. I'll give you a perfect example. I think it was 7 or 8 years ago. Some of our students did a video, team video on Tiananmen Square. They called up and interviewed people who had been in the White House at the time. And for a bunch of 10th graders to do that, to call up James Baker, 10th graders, say, I'd like to talk with you. Now, I didn't have that kind of chutzpah when I was in 10th grade. And one of those people said, I don't want to talk to you. And they said, well, gee, we talked to the other 2 guys, and they talked to a leader who'd been there in Tiananmen Square. And I remember talking to a college admissions department person and telling them what we were trying to do and using that as an illustration. And I said, I think that's better than another advanced placement course. And he said, yes, absolutely. Those are kids who learned how to do research, who learned, those are skills that you need in college and even more importantly out in the job world. So, you know, that tells me we're moving in the right direction.
Good.
And I can give you half a dozen other examples. But that was by serendipity that we stumbled into. I mean, not that we entered the contest knowingly, but the educational value and how deep it was not something we had realized. Obviously, with things like Siemens and Intel, we knew the value of those.
Yeah.
But and we've done things in writing. We have an English Scholars Program that encourages students with an inclination to write to develop their skills at a very high level outside of English classes.
We'll take a short break, Dr. Bierwirth, and we'll be right back.
Thank you.
Please stay with us. Welcome back to Interviews That Matter. I'm your host Raj Mehta. We are having a conversation with Dr. Bierwirth, Superintendent of Herricks School. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, we have talked about the milestones and successes of 12 years now. I'm sure you have faced a lot of challenges also.
Yep.
So, what do we hear from you?
I tend to try to put those out of my mind. The biggest challenges, I suppose, have been financial.
Okay.
I'm blessed with a school district where kids come to school every day. They come prepared to work. They and their parents have extraordinarily high expectations. We don't have fights, or rarely. And while we may not have as much money as some, we certainly don't have as much money as some. We have enough. And it's been tough the last 2 or 3 years, but I feel blessed because I have the raw materials and the environment in which we can push the edge of the envelope. And the community supports it, the board supports it, and the staff is ready to go with it. And that's wonderful. So the challenge is, it's been difficult dealing with a pension system in New York State, with charges to school districts that swing way up and swing way down. And now that we have a tax cap, having a fixed ceiling but a highly variable cost is not a great thing. I'm painfully reminded that 25, 30 years ago, a number of us advocated strongly for New York State to try to set a pension contribution rate that would remain relatively unchanged, as a good corporation would, for 25, 30 years. I mean, maybe have it go from 7.5% to 9% up and down, but try to keep it relatively steady. In good years, the pension system is overfunded. In bad years, you're maybe underfunded, but over the long term, you're where you need to be. And instead, we move swinging wildly from, it's been as high as 24% and down as low as 0.
Wow, so that affects your budget a lot.
Yeah, and before the tax cap, we just tried to explain to the community why it was going up and down that way. Now with the tax cap, we bang our heads against the ceiling. But again, compared to most of the rest of the world, I've been extraordinarily blessed, and we have used that as an opportunity to really push the envelope, rather than just rest on our laurels.
So governor is also like working on the pension reform.
Yeah.
I don't know how far it is going to go or what, but...
Well, the pension reforms that he's done so far will probably make a difference over the next 25, 30 years, but not for the next 5 or 10. And I hope that New York State does not repeat what it's done other times, where they pass a pension reform and then 10 years later it gets undone. And then when things are not so good anymore, they pass another one, and then it gets undone again.
Wow. That's sad.
Yeah. But I hope this time people have learned.
So, our viewers are from South Asia, right? And you say that, there's a major contribution in the school district from children from South Asia and East Asia.
South and East Asia.
Right. So
I don't know. I don't know how true this is of this moment. But 5, 6, 7 years ago, one summer, I was curious. After a New York Times article had been written about us, which showed us as having the highest percentage of Asian, South Asian and East Asian students in New York, New Jersey, or Connecticut, of a K-12 district. And I was curious whether there were any districts elsewhere in the United States which had as high a percentage as we did. So I called all over the country. I called California. and people would say, oh yeah, that district is all Asian. And then I'd call them and find out they had 40% Asian students at a time when we were 55%. And 5-6 years ago, I couldn't find a school district in the United States with a higher percentage of Asian students than we had. But that masks the real picture of Herricks. The last time we did a study, there were 69 different languages spoken in the homes of the 1,400 students in the high school.
Wow.
So we had first, second generation immigrants from Egypt, from Poland, from Romania. And yes, there were more from India and Pakistan and Korea and China. But there's an incredible mix of people living in that community who make education a priority. And that's really extraordinary.
So then there are a lot of good achievers over there from South.
There are a lot of very high achievers. And I like to think that we have a role in that, but I know that what the students bring to school and what their parents, how they support them, makes a huge difference.
Yep. See, parents, as a parent from Asia, South Asia, it's very important. Education is number one priority for our kids. Number one.
Well,
always.
I'm not Asian by background, but it's certainly what my parents expected of me and my siblings when we were growing up. Studying was the first priority.
Right.
And they wanted to see us get A's and hundreds, but it was very clear that they expected you to do the best you could. And actually to do the best you could in whatever you did.
Right.
And I see that with our families, and I see that with our kids. There's another aspect of our students which I find truly extraordinary. They're all very competitive. They really want to succeed, but they are not competitive at the cost of each other. They are happy to see their friends succeed.
Wow, okay.
And they support their friends succeeding. And they are incredibly sensitive to differences in religion, in background, in other differences that from one human being to another. It's not perfection, but as a group of people, I am extraordinarily impressed by the culture our students create and support and maintain. When our kids go off to college, other than meeting somebody from West Virginia, they've experienced about every religion and race and ethnicity and learned how to live and work together with people.
Very important.
And, you know, I think we as adults, whether it's parents or staff, certainly support that. But I have to give an awful lot of credit to the students. It starts relatively young and they maintain it all the way through high school. So that will stand them in good stead in the world that they're going to live in, where wherever you live, you are a citizen of the world.
Now it's global world. Anyway,
yes.
You know, right.
When I read The World is Flat by Thomas Friedman.
Right.
I said to myself, boy, I'm right square in the middle of The World is Flat. And I thought, wow, how fortunate our kids are to be growing up in a community, in a school district, which values that and will help them.
Right. So, you know, that brings me to a question that as a parent, you know, we want our kids to go to the best colleges.
Yep.
You know, because of the education is the key priority. This is what we have heard, okay? I'm not sure how true it is and what is there that probably you know more than me.
Maybe.
Is there something in the colleges, like for example, you know, I've seen, you know, my daughter is from Port Washington School, right? She went to Port Washington, now she's at the University of Michigan.
Great school, great college.
So is there something like a logic or something that when, you know, 1 year there are 5 students goes to Yale and, you know, like big number go to good universities and then next 2 years is like kind of flat? So that doesn't mean kids are not good. What is the logic there?
That's a great question. There isn't a normal logic.
Okay.
The problem for your children, our three children, is that when I applied to Yale,
Right.
the number of applicants was a whole lot smaller and a lot less competitive.
Okay.
I was proud of getting in there. I had to compete, but I didn't have to compete anywhere near as hard as your children or mine. I've talked to college admissions officers. In fact, I visited over, along with Jane Meduna, our high school principal, and Deirdre Hayes, our assistant superintendent. We visited about 100 colleges.
Okay.
And it was great. Almost every place I had a 15, 20-minute, half an hour appointment. Almost every one of them I ended up talking for 2.5, 3 hours because they were fascinated with what we were doing, trying to do. But they would also say, look, I have 1,000 spots and I have 30,000 applicants, and 20,000 of them are super well qualified.
Wow. Wow.
And so it's almost a matter of luck.
Interesting.
And, you know, I say to parents whose kids get into those super competitive colleges, be proud of your child. But remember, there was a certain degree of luck out of that qualified applicant pool that yours got selected. And be sensitive to the fact that parents of 19 other kids who were equally qualified were unlucky. The good thing is that compared to certainly when I went to college, but I would even say 20 to 25 years ago, there are a whole lot more American universities where you can get an unbelievable education.
Right.
And part of that is the quality of that student pool, because if 1 out of 20 is getting in, the other 19 who
has
are
to go
equally
somewhere.
well
Right.
qualified
Right.
are going someplace else.
Right.
And part of what makes an institution is the professors
Right.
and the resources,
Right.
and a large part of it is who are your fellow students. And if they're smart and intellectually curious and prepared to work hard, you can have a great experience. And there are many, many more good colleges today. But gee, I see students from Herricks, and I'm proud of the ones who get in certain places, and then I look at some others and I say, holy mackerel, why didn't they get in? And then I see them get into other good places.
Right.
The other part of it is, what do you do when you get there? I'll talk about Yale because that's where I went. You can get a terrible education at Yale if you don't take advantage of anything.
Exactly.
And you can get a really first-class education at a very large number of universities if you take advantage of what they have to offer. And you know from the business world that what used to exist when I was a kid, when I was a young kid, where the world was dominated by American world, business world was dominated by CEOs who went to Yale, Harvard, or Princeton. Now they come from everywhere.
Everywhere, right? Yeah.
And the college helps, but what you made of it and what you do in your career. My wife is in search, executive search, in asset management. And the range of people who are at the top of the field and where they went to school and what their backgrounds were, what countries they came from, I mean, is extraordinary. It's not Harvard Business School or Wharton alone. There's a huge range of places. So I would say the same thing of college. I do wish more of our kids got into some of those places because I really think they earned it. And if they lived in North Dakota, they'd be better off.
There you go. See, that's why. Because it's all divided into region also, I guess.
Oh gosh, probably the worst thing we did for our 3 children in terms of getting into college was moving back, we were in New York before and we moved to Oregon, but to move from Oregon back to New York, they probably would have been better off to stay in Oregon. There was a smaller applicant pool for those super competitive colleges.
No, I agree with you that there are a lot of good colleges out there. The only advantage that I see in a like Ivy League or a better college is that the network that you build over there.
Yeah, although
and that's a huge advantage. Obviously.
It is a huge advantage, although I think for professions in which the graduate school is where people ultimately end up, I think going to a name graduate school is more important than going to a name college.
Right.
And for families that cannot afford it, I think, when the recession hit, I saw more and more of our students accepted into places like Georgetown or an Ivy League college, going to Nassau Community College for 2 years, and then going to Georgetown.
Okay.
And it would have been great for them to have had 4 years of Georgetown.
Right.
But if the alternative is not going at all because the family finances can't afford it, and I think if I was advising somebody, I would say that if you ultimately expect to go to law school or medical school, save the money, work hard, get yourself into the best graduate school. Where you go to medical school, where do you go to law school, where do you go to business school, that's what people are going to look at on your resume.
Good advice.
It certainly is borne out by what I hear from my wife in terms of the people that she encounters. And that network is important.
Yes. Yeah.
If you go to Wharton, that is a name in the business community.
Right.
Right. The quality of the people going there is recognized, and there is a network there.
Yeah, I have an example, like a friend of mine's son was in Princeton, graduated from Princeton, and he lost a job in this last financial crisis. He sent a letter to all the Princeton graduate in Wall Street, and in 3 days he had a job.
Well, he must have been also good.
So,
he must have been good.
Yeah.
It does help.
It does help, right? Yeah.
It does help. But if you, but I guess I'm going on the basis that not everybody can go to Princeton, and not everybody has the money to do that.
I agree. I agree.
So,
with you, yeah. No, I think that advice is very good. That graduate school is more important than undergraduate is fine, but graduate school is a lot more important.
I see our students. I had never heard of Sophie Davis.
Right. Sophie Davis,
medical school.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And we have a fair number of students who go to a joint med program at Brooklyn College or Sophie Davis. Now, in some communities on Long Island, if you mentioned Sophie Davis, you would get a blank stare.
Right. Yeah.
But I've asked doctors, what do they think about graduates of Sophie Davis? And they know that this is for kids who are incredibly bright.
Right.
And that it's harder to get into the joint med program at Sophie Davis than it is to get into an Ivy League college.
Right.
Now, the world as a whole may not know that.
Right.
And for communities like Scarsdale or some other place that values titles and whose lots of people went to Ivy League colleges, they may not know Sophie Davis.
Right.
But if the profession that you're going to go into knows the quality of the program and knows that it is people who worked their tails off to get into a place like that. And I'm really glad to see our kids go there.
Yep.
We have a lot of students in Herricks who go into joint med programs.
Yes.
At one and the same time, I have huge admiration for them, and I get a little queasy. I mean, here they are, they're 18 years old. They are committing themselves to this extraordinary, rigorous program
For
right off the bat.
8 years, 10 years.
Yeah.
Something like that.
But my hat's off to them, and they do really well.
Yeah.
Among the places I visited was Sophie Davis, and they said, "Oh yeah, we love your kids. Or the Macaulay Honors Program at CUNY.
Mm-hmm.
I looked at their statistics.
Mm-hmm.
They're comparable to Yale or Harvard or MIT.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I think that we should be worried for our children's children, because as tough as it is for your and my children, it's going to be even tougher for their children. Because I don't see
Right.
Yale and Harvard and MIT or any of those places doubling or tripling their enrollment. So where it was 8,000 for me and now it's 30,000, maybe it'll be 100,000 applying for those same 1,000 spots.
Right. Yep. And it could be all from all over the world.
And it is.
It is now also, but it
increasingly
will be
all
more
over
even.
the world.
Right. Yeah.
And I support that.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, I'm American. I think Yale, Harvard are American universities, but I think they're better universities for taking people from all over the world.
Let me ask you a question now, because this question comes up in many of our discussions, like when we meet friends and all that, and a lot of my friends are from Herricks School District, even though I'm from Port. And it's a general question. It's really not particularly for Herricks School District, right? So my daughter, when she was in school, always when I ask her about any subject, she said, let's say she got a A or A minus or something like that, and she would go always like, and somebody else got A plus, she would say, oh, she has an easy teacher.
Yeah.
So the question always comes up that is there any standard that a school district can adopt, that for example, teacher A will grade it differently than a teacher B with the same subject, and that penalizes many of the good students even.
Yeah, that's a good question. There are variations.
Yeah.
And there's a variation from one high school to the next.
Right.
Herricks has a reputation of grading low. Fortunately, the colleges our students apply to know that. They also know the high schools that are comparable but tend to give higher grades, and they take that into account. Now, if you're applying to a college where maybe only one student applies every 10 years, that could be a problem. But more directly to your point,
Right.
the great advantage of the Regents program historically was that for a long time it was the only reasonably standardized high school education in the United States. So if you got an 85 in Regents biology in 1975 or 1965,
Right.
a college anywhere knew within a reasonably narrow range what material you'd been taught and what your level of proficiency was. Because it didn't make any difference from one teacher to the next or one high school to the next. A B, maybe not the difference between a B and a B plus, but between an A and a D, you knew. Certainly between a B and a C, you knew. And the same thing is true of advanced placement classes. Yes, there's a different grade maybe during the course of the year, but when you end up taking the AP exam, that's national. It's an international standard. We advise students, if they can, to take at least 4 or 5 advanced placement courses, and not necessarily more, across a variety of areas.
Okay.
And part of the reason to do that is to show how you compare on a national and international level. And for students from school districts like Port Washington or Herricks, all the school districts that are in the same ballpark, if you're in the top 10% of the class, everybody knows that.
Right.
But what do you do if you're in a school district like that and there are a huge number of high achieving students and you're halfway down the class? How do you show that even though you are in the middle of your class in Herricks, that you are as good as the top 5 or 10% from another place?
Right.
One way is Regents, and on a higher level, advanced placement. Because if you're in the middle of the class in Herricks, but you're still getting a 4 or 5 on an advanced placement exam, you have shown that on an absolute basis that you are highly competitive. That's part of the reason why we were trying to get more and more of our students to take at least one advanced placement exam before they went off to college. It was their way of proving to the outside world that even if they weren't in the top 10% of the class, that they were highly competitive, that they were very well prepared.
See, that is one thing, right? I mean, you know, like SAT, how many APs you take, those are like obviously important. But then the grades, right? You know, that the grades student get, you know, and then again, this question will be, is there any standard that in your mind can be developed between the same, you know, teacher, like math teacher, let's say?
There should be. I mean, they should be talking to each other.
Right? You know, I mean,
and they should be making sure that they're covering the same material.
And a standard grading system.
Yeah.
That is, I think, very important.
I agree. Right. It's hard to implement, and it's hard to get people to, but I won't say that the colleges know individual teachers.
Exactly. They would not.
They do know. And I assume that over the course of a high school career, you will get some teachers who graded relatively easily and some that. But as long as the band is not too broad, I can live with that. If the band is broad, that's a problem. Parenthetically, I would tell you that when I left New York State and went to go Oregon, there were no standards. We had 10 high schools in Portland, 56,000 students. What a B in biology meant from one high school to the next, there was no comparison.
Wow.
And even from one teacher to the next down the hall, there was not a standardized curriculum. And there were no standardized grading systems across the school district. Yeah, we had the same scale, 0 to 100, or I don't remember now whether it was A, B, C, but I really didn't know what a B in biology meant from one high school to the next. And I thought, what a huge disadvantage to the kids coming from the less competitive high schools.
Exactly, yeah.
Some college will take a look at a student there in the top 10% of the class and say, that kid went to high school A, and we know that high school is not as strong as 3 other high schools in town. That must have been watered down. There was no way for that student to prove.
Exactly.
Now we started, there was an international baccalaureate program in one of the high schools when I got there, and by the time I left, we had expanded it into 3, or it was in the process of being expanded into 3. That's a great program, and again, it has this advantage. You get a certain score in an international baccalaureate class anywhere in the world. They know what the level of rigor that you saw day in and day out, and they knew what kind of exam you took, and if you got a certain grade, they knew what that meant. And yeah, there are probably variations, but they're variations at a high level and within a relatively narrow band. I think we've done a real disservice in this country for a long time, watering down the quality of, or the rigor of a lot of courses, and giving kids inflated grades and sending them off to college and having them having large numbers of students go into remedial classes. I think it's criminal for a student to leave a high school in New York State or any other state, be given a diploma, which presumably means that they're ready to take the next step, find themselves going off into college and taking remedial courses at a very basic level. That's a real disservice to those kids. And also their families, particularly if they were told, you're getting an A, you're getting an A, you're getting an A, and then discover Well, yeah, you got A in that course, but it was all watered down.
Wow.
In 2006, we and 3 other districts talked our way into the PISA exam, which I'm sure you know well. We wanted to benchmark ourselves against the world. And we didn't tell anybody, but our huge fear was that we would do much better than the United States, but not be competitive on a world level. And we were really pleased when we came out with a very good score, better than Finland. But it was part of us also wanting to know whether we were truly preparing students at a world-class level or not. And you know from your business, you have to constantly benchmark yourself against your competitors.
Absolutely, yes.
So you can hold all your own staff meetings and pat yourselves on the back, and if the quality of services or products that you're producing don't keep moving forward and your competitors do, you can pat yourself on the back all you want, and then one day you're going to wake up and discover, yeah.
Yep.
And we wanted to know whether we were as good as we thought we were.
Right.
And I think that's hugely important. So the benchmarks that exist that are at a high level now are the Regents, which used to be a very high standard, got watered down, and I believe it's going to be made a very solid standard again. And then the ones on a national and international level like AP and International Baccalaureate. Those are the things that allow a student to know where they really stand.
So teachers' evaluation would help.
Yeah.
So
I don't like what New York State is doing.
Right.
I think it's mostly about press conferences. But yes, it's very hard to get a job in Herricks, like it is in any of the highly competitive districts on Long Island.
Right.
We have hired very few people the last few years, but in my first 7 or 8 years, I would guess that we let a quarter to a third of the people go who we hired, almost always within the first year.
Oh, okay.
And I will say to you that that was done with the 100% support of the Teachers Association.
Okay, that's good.
Their expectations of who they wanted as colleagues, as who they wanted students to have after they left them or before they came to them, who they were going to work with on curriculum, their expectations were as high as ours. And there were times when we would hear concerns about a teacher who we'd recently hired from teachers before we even heard from administrators. And how well students were doing was part of that. I'm very involved on a state level in the development of the new teacher and principal evaluation systems.
Okay.
I think a lot of it is mumbo jumbo. My brother told a joke recently which reminds me of some of this.
Okay.
He talked about a balloonist who lands in a field and doesn't know where he is. He sees a man walking across the field. He asks the man, where am I? The farmer, whoever he is, says, you're in a basket in the middle of a field. And the balloonist says, you must be an accountant. He said, how'd you know that? Because you gave me absolutely precise information, which is not terribly useful. A lot of the, I hope I haven't offended any accountants, my apologies. A lot of what I would say we are developing in New York State in terms of evaluating teachers is absolutely precise in some ways and not terribly useful.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
But I think good school districts have, for as long as I've been in teaching, looked at grades, looked at the results that teachers produce, have placed the highest priority on professional development.
Right.
I've never met a bad teacher who became better simply because they were told that they were bad. I don't think you fire your way to excellence. I don't know of anybody in the business world who has been successful who hires mediocre people and gets better by firing them. You go out into the workforce, you hire really good people, and you develop their skills for the entire time that they're with you.
Right.
Education needs to be exactly the same way. And there is incredible research now that didn't exist a decade ago about what makes the most successful school systems in the world. It's 4 things, and they just happen to coincide with what I have seen and believed. Hire people from among top graduates, set higher standards for all students, massive amounts of professional development, and intervening early and forcefully in dysfunctional situations. As a country, we have done none of those.
Wow.
And every other country in the world, whether they're doing it or not, seems to believe that. And I look at what's happened in Canada, in Poland. Canada's education system, according to the best information I have, was relatively mediocre. And over the last 10, 15 years, they have moved from being relatively mediocre to being up there in the top ranks.
Wow.
And Poland is on the way doing the same thing. Of course, we know about Korea and Singapore and Finland. But, you know, I think until this country believes in that data and implements policies that follow those things, we're not going to really make much of a difference.
Wow.
We are not, if we keep hiring teachers who are marginal, we don't in Herricks, but lots of places are forced to because there's
nothing available.
And just hiring them and then firing them, or telling them that they are terrible, that isn't gonna. We need to do all 4 of those things, and it's not necessarily money. In a lot of countries, teaching is a highly prestigious profession, more prestigious than in the United States. I saw that when I went to India. I mean, being a teacher was
people
an
respect,
honor.
A lot of respect.
Yes. If all of a sudden next fall, New York State said, you must be in the top 10% of college graduates in order to be hired in a teaching job in New York State, that would give it instant
boost.
I think a lot of school districts, mine included, have those kinds of expectations of the people they hire. And then we expect them to produce. And the quid pro quo is we put a lot of money into professional development so they can get better and better and better. But just giving teachers and principals a score from 1 to 100 doesn't do anything for me.
Doesn't do anything. Okay, got you.
I don't think it's moving us forward.
Okay.
It's great press conferences, but I don't think it moves us forward.
Hopefully, when we start something, hopefully it'll turn into something different. That's what we hope for.
I agree. As part of,
because if we don't start anywhere, it's not going to happen.
No, and we need to. There's places where we need to start. And the students who suffer the most are the ones who need it the most.
I agree with you.
I appreciate your optimism. It is why I have stayed involved, as involved as I have been on a statewide level. I figure this is one of the things that I can do to contribute back to the state as a whole and to my profession, is to stay involved. And I have been. I'm co-chair of the New York State Superintendent's Group on Assessment, and I am one of the 3 superintendents in the state on the task force on teacher and principal evaluation. They haven't paid that much attention to us so far, but we're going to keep trying.
But one thing I tell you, you got to. I'm glad you're involved, because if you people like you don't get involved, that's not right.
Well,
as a society, as for the people of New York, everybody.
I was lucky enough to be born in a family that could afford to provide a good education.
Right.
And we have been able to do that for our children. But as a state and as a country, we are not going to move forward unless we invest in all of our kids.
Exactly. That's the thing, right?
One of the neat things that I did when I was president of Outward Bound was to go to Singapore.
Okay.
And I had some friends who were in the government, and we talked a great deal about education. And Singapore Outward Bound was an integral part of the education system there in a way that nothing else in the world was. And I saw that students, this was in 2000, I saw that students in Singapore who were at the bottom of the class were about where our 50th percentile is.
Wow.
And as I had read for 2 decades before that, they had decided as a small island nation that their success in the future depended upon having a highly educated workforce. And that if they did that, companies would move there, that they would move up the value addeds.
Yeah, that starts with that only, right? It starts with that, and everything kind of falls into its place, you know.
As a country, we didn't have to do that
Before,
but
now it's different.
And I don't think it's the right thing for society to write off a portion of its population and say, well, you're not competitive on a world level, you're going to have to do some substandard wage. I don't think that's acceptable.
Right.
And I think we now have ample evidence in this world that everybody benefits if everybody moves forward. A few rich people, they manage, but that's not economic success for a country.
Not at all. So knowing all this, like, you know, constraints and obviously, you know, what is your vision for Herricks in the next 5 years?
My vision for Herricks in the next 5 years is to continue to deepen the quality of education. What we started out in doing, I'd love to have every single student who graduates from Herricks take at least one advanced placement course, and preferably 2 or 3. But I will feel really good if we build in from the time that a student is in kindergarten as much application of knowledge, as much critical thinking, as much creativity as we can. So yes, it's great that you're learning math. It's great that you're getting all the way to AB calculus, but do you know how to apply that? Can you apply it in creative ways? Do you know how to work with groups of people in applying that knowledge? So, I have. That's my vision. It's that I think will help prepare students better for the world. Kids who can think. If you pose a challenge to them, even one they can't solve, do they know how to approach solving it? Or will they just sit there and look at the piece of paper? Will they know how to, who to go to, how to get other people to help them? The same way you and I do in our jobs every day. We don't succeed or fail by ourselves. We go to other people. We bounce ideas off of people. We say, I had this problem. You got any idea where we could go with that? Obviously that looks different for a kindergartner than it does for a 12th grader. But are we helping students from the time they enter the school district develop that problem-solving ability? Critical thinking is huge. You know better than I do the amount of garbage that's out there on the internet, and everybody looks at it, and says, "Oh, it's on the internet. It must be true."
Right.
Well, no.
That's not true.
No. How do you learn to make critical determinations about the integrity of information, its relative value, whether it's an outright fraud?
Right.
That's always been around.
Right.
But with the internet, it's what our children will confront will be many times more complex
Right.
than what we confronted when we were their age, or than we confront now. Learning how to make critical judgments is going to be huge for them.
So that's what your goal is, basically,
Yeah.
to prepare kids.
I want to see kids all get 5s on AP Physics. I want to see all those things, but I won't really feel good unless I know that they can take that knowledge and apply it to real world situations on a global level,
Right.
and use it to make critical judgments about their work, about the world, about information out there. So that's my vision. I expect to have only completed a part of that by the time I retire.
You
But
never
I'd
know.
like to be further along than I am now.
Exactly. You never know, right? Your final message to our community, please. Parents, to viewers. Most of them are parents.
Yeah, as am I.
Right.
I would say support your kids.
Okay.
Help them learn how to deal with failure. You don't make progress in life unless you try things, and if you keep trying things, you're going to fail some.
Right.
So encouraging a willingness to take risks, all things that people do now. Continue to support your kids, and have the same high expectations that I experienced as a child, that I am experiencing now as a superintendent. And don't let go of it. It's the right thing. It is absolutely the right thing.
See, in my world, failure is not trying enough. That's all I can
Absolutely.
say. So obviously you got to keep trying, and you will be successful.
Yeah.
That's all.
And you can live in a low level of mediocrity if you only do the safe things, but you don't make progress. And you know what? Taking risks is fun, as long as the cost of failure isn't too high.
Right.
Live out there on the edge. So, those kids I was talking about who did the thing on Tiananmen Square.
Right.
Okay, they could have called up that person and he could have said, I'm not going to talk to you. Okay, so they would have failed.
Right.
As it was, they succeeded. But, okay, if they'd failed with one, they could have moved on and had success with a second and third.
Right.
And it would have been equally successful as a project.
I agree.
So, yeah. Final message, that's a good one to end.
Well, I really appreciate your thoughts and your wealth of knowledge that you have given to us today.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your time, and I'm sure, I hope that you come again
It was an
on
honor
the
to
show,
be here.
and for more deep information that we're looking
Well,
for.
thanks.
Which
I think we just skimmed the surface.
Right, exactly. That's the way I see it. Yeah. Thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, you can email me at rajmitv@gmail.com. Again, that's rajmitv@gmail.com. If you want to watch our prior air show, you can go to youtube.com/Infosys International. Again, that's youtube.com/Infosys International. Until next time, have a good week. Thank you.